a handful of beloved characters fell to the Night King's army in what HBO is billing as the longest battle scene ever filmed. Others found glory, and lived to fight another day. Before we get into what happened in The Long Night, otherwise known as Season 8. Episode 3, I just want to take a moment to reflect on what we just experienced. Not just the climax of what could go down as the most successful TV franchise in history. And not just the longest battle scene in cinematic history, per the show's creators. But a rare communal moment for a huge chunk of the culture to gather around our high-definite campfires and witness an extraordinary act of storytelling. Sure, there's plenty to quibble with. But let's start by acknowledging that it's rare, exciting, and pretty cool to see a group of professionals at the top of their game take a swing this big and more or less connect. As a long-time Arya fan, I also want to say up front that it was entirely unexpected but very welcome to see her come through at the last possible second and rescue humanity from eternal death and darkness. Now, I get why she had to spend several seasons becoming a ruthless and supernaturally skilled assassin. This episode was all about action. Starting with that opening scene of Samwell having a weapon thrust upon him, his bravado from the previous episode long forgotten. And mood. First and foremost, not that you could blame him. The war against the Night King's army felt well and truly unwinnable at the outset of this episode. No matter how dashing all our heroes looked arrayed in front of their armies. And sure enough, as Jon, Daenerys, and their respective dragons observed from a nearby mountaintop, things got pretty ugly pretty quick. The Red Woman's trick of giving all the Dothraki flaming sights was a morale builder. Until every last one of them blinked out on the horizon as the army of the dead overwhelmed them. At first, I thought Jorah was dead, but no, not yet, anyway. He came rushing back, and before long the battle became as conventional as a zombie war can be. With all our Favs fighting Iliad style as one nameless undead soldier after another bounced off their weapons. Early on, I actually believed we might lose some big characters abruptly, but it soon became clear that any time someone whose name you could immediately recall got overwhelmed, someone else whose name you know would come save them. The creators had bold moves in mind, but they weren't about to start sending name-brand actors home without proper send-offs. Not that I blame them. For a thrilling few seconds, it looked like Daenerys was going to sort out the army of the dead herself. By directing Drogon's fiery dragon breath at the field of battle. But the Night King has a lot of tricks up his sleeves, including the ability to control the weather, hence the whole, winter is coming, business, I guess. So next thing you knew, Drogon and Rhaegal were being bounced around in a snowy storm cloud. It would help if Jon and Dany had harnesses of some kind, with seatbelts, ideally. They even crashed into each other at some point. Do you know the name Edd Tollett? Because he was the first name character to die. Even though he wasn't on the betting pool that my brother-in-law in Mississippi sent us earlier today. He and Sam were both members of the Night's Watch, so it's fitting that he died while helping Sam peel off a few zombies. R.I.P., EDD. We may have finally figured out your name only last episode, but still. You'll be missed. Team Humanity knew they weren't going to be able to hold off the zombies forever. So their plan was to retreat back into Winterfell Castle and then light the surrounding trenches on fire. The first part worked great. The second part, not so much. Sir Davos's big strategy of waving his hands over his head to get Dany's attention was undone by the winter cloud. So Melisandre had to walk out and say a bunch of stuff in High Valyrian to cast a fire spell. That was all right, but then the Whites figured out that they could create unhuman bridges over the flaming trench by throwing their worthless bodies onto it. We were all wondering what was going to happen with the crypt, and for a long time the answer was not much. Sansa told him to shut up. So they did. That's when things got really ugly. Tyrion didn't want to be there. Then she started throwing shade at the Dragon Queen, and Missandei shut her down. That's about it, really. But it was suspenseful. You knew they weren't going to be able to hide down there forever. Back in the Godswood, Theon spent a lot of the episode just standing around while Bran did his whole galactic brain thing or watched with some ravens to find the Night King. After bridging the trenches, the Whites started climbing the walls. So it was up to Gendry, Jem, and the gang to fight them all off one by one, a project that was manifestly futile from the start. Still, it gave Brienne a chance to save Jem's life, so that was nice. Meanwhile, all the fire was giving the Hound the heebie-jeebies, which Beric found annoying, since they still had a lot of fighting to do. The Hound had pretty much given up when he saw Arya in full berserker mode fly across a rooftop, chased by Whites. That brought him back into the fray. Meanwhile, an undead giant slammed through the front gate, threatening to take the inevitable Winterfell renovation bills to a whole new level. Lyanna Mormont didn't seem like much of a threat to him, until he picked her up in his hand and she stabbed him in his glowing blue eye. A heroic final act for this precocious young warrior, or was it final? No sooner have Jon and Dany's dragons have figured out how to achieve cruising altitude above the clouds than the Night King comes to spoil the fun by trying to roast them with blue fire. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Arya is using her home court advantage and her assassin skills to sneak through some rooms without being mobbed by zombies. It's a fun, inventive sequence that isn't really worth rehashing, but it leads to a big reunion rescue at the hands of the Hound and Beric, who finally crooks once and for all. His purpose having been fulfilled at last, and then an encounter with Melisandre, who restores Arya's faith that tonight will end in something other than disaster. What do we say to the god of death? Not today. And off Arya goes. The undead Viserion, with the Night King on his back, is really a pain in the ass, and here he is flamboyant Winterfell. Jon doesn't like that, and so begins a big confusing dragon fight. The Night King is knocked off Viserion, and Jon's dragon throws him too. What happened to Rhaegal after that? Your guess is as good as mine. Daenerys is so proud of herself when Drogon unloads a lungful of fire at the Night King, but lo and behold, he is unscathed. Disappointing. So now John has to go after him on foot. Is it me, or does the Night King suddenly have a whole new swagger? He looks like a character in a 1970s cop movie here. Anyway, did you think he was going to engage in a fair fight with John? Nah, bro. Instead, he is going to raise up a whole new army of the dead using all the people his original zombie army killed. So that will keep John, and everyone else, busy while he saunters back to the Godswood to take out Bran and erase humanity's memory, or whatever it is we agreed was the reason he wanted to kill Bran. But first Dany has to save John from being overwhelmed by zombies. And then Jorah has to save Dany from the same fate. And then there's this great piano music over all this incredibly dark action, as the Whites invade the crypt and start killing everyone down there, except all the people you have heard of. And all our heroes are getting so damn tired. And then Bran tells Theon he's awesome, never change, and then Theon for some reason charges the Night King, and, well, it was real, Theon. We kind of knew you weren't going to make it to the end, but thanks for the memories. You really went through a lot. And Viserion is still blowing blue fire at Jon so he can't get to Bran, and Jorah and Dany are still whacking away at zombies. And now it looks like Jorah is going down too. And that's someone we really do care about. Like, that's a big loss. That's gonna leave a mark. And now it looks like the Night King is just gonna kill Bran, and that'll be the end of it. No wonder he looks so cocky. He's got his White Walker bros to back him up. What could go wrong for him now? And then here is Arya flying in from absolutely nowhere, the professional assassin and professional sneak. But the Night King grabs her hand and she drops her dagger into her other hand and plunges it into his torso. And now he is turning to glass and shattering. And in seconds the same fate has befallen his entire godforsaken army. It's over now. It's all over. Except the crying over Jorah, and one last nude scene for Melisandre, the Red Woman. She said she wouldn't survive until dawn, but she seems fine. But as Ser Davos watches from the gate, she walks out onto the battlefield, removes her cloak, removes her necklace, removes her clothes, and returns to her ancient self. And dies. And that's it. Until next week. Game of Thrones, that final shot, explained what that death means for Westeros. The final death of this big battle episode of Game of Thrones belongs not to one of the main heroes or even the big bad villain. Instead it's Melisandre of Ashai, stripped of her magical necklace, who collapses under the force of her hundreds of years alive in this world and turns to dust. But what does her death really mean? First, a quick reminder on Melisandre's age. Way back in 2012, Melisandre actress Carice Van Hoyten told Access Hollywood, "I don't know how old she is. But she's way over 100 years, so she is a wiser spirit, in a way, but it's difficult for me to say too much because A, we want it to at least stay sort of a mystery, and B, I didn't read the books. As you can tell." This interview was given long before the HBO show went into intensive spoiler lockdown. In an interview after the season 6 premiere when Mel showed her true colors, showrunner David Benioff calls her several centuries old. Similarly, the actor who played Maester Cresson, Oliver Ford Davies, told journalists in 2013 that, according to Van Hoyten, Melisandre is 400 years old. She offered that fact up by way of explaining why her character survived poison in season 2. Melisandre survived poison, implying that she might not just be old, but also immortal. Chapter in the most recent A Song of Ice and Fire book, which is pretty revealing. Episode 1, and his character croaked. Melisandre had her first, and only, POV. In it there's the line, Melisandre had practiced her art for years beyond count. And she had paid the price. The priestess also only sleeps 1 hour a night, and is trying to cut out sleep entirely, and doesn't eat. Saying, Arhalelor provided her with all the food she needed, but that was something best concealed from mortal men. All this implies, again, that she is not just old but possibly immortal. But we found out in this week's episode that she's not actually immortal. She just had one last thing to do. I saw him in the flames, fighting at Winterfell, Melisandre says of Jon Snow, but it's his sister, Arya, that she's come to really help. This calls back, of course, to their season 3 parting when Melisandre promised she would see Arya again. I see a darkness in you, and in that darkness, eyes staring back at me. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, eyes sealed shut forever. We will meet again. Those eyes sealed shut forever belong to the Night King. When Melisandre asked Arya what we say to the god of death, and Arya answered with the words her teacher Sirio Forel taught her, not today, they were speaking again of the Night King. Who better defined as the god of death than the leader of the army of the dead? Melisandre has always talked about her purpose being tied to the Great War. That purpose achieved, she can finally rest. She can finally die.